Professional serving community. Talkradio.nyc.
I made the trek this morning. I came all the way back up to the attic just below the roof of my house. Philanthropy and Focus, Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector. I'm feeling, I don't know why I'm feeling extra anxious about this show today. I really am. I'm feeling fired up. If the numbers are right, this is the 175th episode of this program, if I did the math right, which to me is unbelievable because it's an idea I had. It was a thing I said. I said, I'm going to go do this show. It's called Philanthropy and Focus. And then I walked around telling people for 2 years that I was going to do the show and nothing happened. COVID happens January 8th, 2021. I'm here in the attic and we do the first ever episode. And that was Katie McGowan from Horseability here on Long Island. So a little bit of home cooking again today. Most, if not, most, I'll say, of the organizations that we connect with are Long Island-based, New York City-based nonprofit organizations, though we have had folks around the country and around the globe on the show. Today is even a little more about home cooking. Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds, good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Tommy D. Great to see you. Thank you so much for having me on and for a landmark 175th show. Congrats.
I love it. I love it. I was out to dinner a couple weeks ago with a colleague of ours, Lisa Birch from Epic here in Long Island, and she wants to be on episode 200. So we're trying to work out the details. I wanted to have her on the episode right away. She liked the number 200. We'll see how we work that out. So you're here for a big one too. Everyone's a big one, gang, because here's the thing. I'm bringing on leaders in nonprofit organizations, as I like to say, to help them tell their story and amplify their messages. And that's what it is. I tell you this all the time, or at least I used to say it all the time. Nonprofits change our lives each and every day. And it's the leaders and their staff and their volunteers that are the people that are on the front lines that are making impact and making change. I wore this t-shirt. I was cleaning out my drawer. I got about 1,000 t-shirts. It says, believe there is good in the world, but it actually says in yellow, be the good in the world. So if you're only listening, you have to imagine this, or send me an email. I'll text you a picture of me wearing the t-shirt. But the thing about it is, that's the thing. We can be the change. We can be the good. And I think I'd encourage you all to be the good. Somehow this morning, I woke up listening to Wayne Dyer. Not necessarily all into Wayne Dyer, but when you listen to Louise Hay or Tony Robbins or Dr. Joe Dispenza, YouTube has a mind of its own to throw you different curveballs. So this is kind of how I started. So I'm in this different zone. But I talk about being extra anxious today, and it's because I want to serve, and this show is about service. So I want to make sure that we tell the right stories. And yes, it's entertaining, and people plug in because they want to see if I'm going to be silly and whatnot. But that's not what the show is about. The show is about delivering the messages and the good work. And when I look at Dr. Reynolds' background and biography, which, to be honest with you, I could just read that for an hour, and that would be the whole show. So we're not going to do that because that wouldn't be as fun. But I think in terms of, I want to be mindful of making sure we come to this episode from a place of service. Before Dr. Reynolds and I get into it, I want to say this. The Long Island Imagine Awards applications will be available. I'm not going to tell you this down to the second because it's 34 days, 1 hour, 55 minutes, and 19 seconds. And then it's 18 seconds after that. There's like a countdown. Go to imagineawardsli.com, imagineawardsli.com. Ken Serini, I almost said imagineawardsla.com. I don't know what that means. I don't know if there'll be a Los Angeles Imagine Awards one day. I've heard that we might be going up to Westchester at some point soon. Shout out to New York City Imagine Awards, Ken Serini, Kellyanne Serini, and the whole team at Serini and Associates. So, but the reason I bring it up about the applications will be available is because they go live on September 12th, but also there's still sponsorships available. My firm, Vanguard Benefits, has been sponsoring the Rising Star Award for the last 6 or 7 years. The Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, Accessibility Award is available for sponsorship. And then also there's sponsorship for the Hall of Fame. I shout that out because you might be listening and you might be connected to businesses and nonprofits that would benefit from doing that. All right, commercials aside, let's get into the program. The name of the organization is Family and Children's Association. The name of the leader is Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds. I want you to tell stories, your background, like we talked about. I'm going to pepper in some data points that I have later on, probably come back from break. But I always really like to start with, who are you, sir? How did this happen? How do you end up saying, what was the catalyst? I assume there's something in your life where, there's a crossroads where we make these decisions on, I'm going to go work in the social services sector. I want to make an impact for people. Can you tell us about that? How did that work for you?
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of reasons you enter the space. And generally, when you ask folks in health and human services how you got into this, they say, oh, I'm a people person. And then your voice begins to trail off and that kind of thing. Look, I think when you get into the space, it's because as a kid, you needed help and didn't get it. Maybe you needed help and you got it. Or you're grateful that you didn't need as much help and you saw people around you that needed help. For me, it was a little bit of all of those things. I grew up in Holtzville, home of the IRS. There wasn't a heck of a lot else there. Had a rough time in high school. I still think back. There was a ninth grade English teacher who said to me, Reynolds, things are going to go either really good for you or really bad. And it was like a challenge,
Yeah.
right? It was like, wow, I don't actually know either, but that feels a little bit like a challenge. And I still remember it to this day. I mean, think about how many things you heard in ninth grade that you still remember to this day. And so one of the things that I saw early on and had some exposure to is family violence. And so my first job out of college was with the Victims Information Bureau of Suffolk County, now merged with ECLI in Suffolk County, providing court advocacy to victims of domestic violence who are looking for orders of protection. And I did that for a little bit more than a year. It was a time in Suffolk County where within a very short period of time, there were 7 women killed at the hands of their partners. It was a rough time. And at that point in time, there wasn't all of this, mindfulness and work support and that kind of thing.
Right.
At the same time, the AIDS crisis was beginning to hit. And here on Long Island.
What year? We're talking about like 1988, like
1989. So November 6, 1989, I take a job at an AIDS organization. It's now defunct. I took a job as an AIDS organization. I remember my mind being blown because I came to understand that all of these young men on all of these folks that were using heroin were dying left and right, and nobody cared. And keep in mind, and it's hard, especially for younger folks, to kind of go back to this. It took President Reagan 60,000 AIDS deaths before he said the word in public. And so I watched an entire generation of young gay men die off. Well, nobody did anything. I watched injection drug users in North Belport and Coram and Gordon Heights dying off, and nobody was doing anything. And I did that work for 20 years. Fast forward to today, Tommy, and as you know, I'm very active in the opioid crisis, and it feels like almost like coming full circle, right? Back then, heroin was the drug of choice, very different population. Nobody cared. They're drug users, let them go and that kind of thing. And here we are now.
Junkies, man. Don't worry about it.
Right.
Where is that? How is that an answer to anything, right? Like we're supposed to be reaching out and pulling them up and helping people out, not brushing them off. I mean, look, I'm sure we're going to get into the mental health conversation today, and as that relates to substance abuse and things like that. But I mean, if we cast everyone aside because they get themselves jammed up and everything, I mean, I'll say it right here, and most people who know me know this because I don't hide it. September 21st will be 14 years. I've not had a sip of alcohol in this body, and that's a big deal. And thank you. I appreciate that. And I bring it up because I was never somebody that was missing work or, I was whatever functional drinker was, right? Whatever that means, I grew up in the bar business, and it was just, I was a bartender, and then I was a salesman, and, I'm not sure which was worse, being a bartender or being a salesman for having access to drinking. But the thing about it is, if we just cast people away because of some decisions or some situations that they're in, Dr. Reynolds, I mean, what are we doing, right? I don't grasp it.
Well, and look, the reality is for many young people, that's predetermined, right? So we talk about choices, decisions, that kind of thing. I grew up in a household impacted heavily by alcohol. I lost my mother to chronic alcoholism. And so, I came to understand early on and have talked to my kids about the fact that we're at higher risk for alcoholism. And so if you're born into a family, socially, genetically, environmentally, you are at infinitely higher risk than the kid sitting next to you that may not have the same background and history. And so there's a lot of kids that are born with some precursors that potentially expose them to bigger and badder things. And without the right interventions, they're down that road. So it's not even always free choice that people make. There's some things that are predetermined in our lives.
Genetics in the background, and who the socialization, or so there's so much here. So let's go back a little bit. So it's 1989, right? Obviously, age it was scary. Look, I was born in 78, man. So I remember growing up and having fear and not understanding. And I think there was a lot of fear around this, of course. But I think part of how we get rid of fear, and I want to hear your opinion on this, is education and understanding and becoming aware of certain things. And it makes me, again, I was younger, I guess, than you were at the time. So I don't remember Reagan having, like, it sounds like just the whole country just looked the other way is the age crisis. Yeah.
They did. And I think when things are overwhelming emotionally or scary, we tend to tune them out. Right. And with AIDS, you had, the anti-gay stigma, you had the anti-drug user stigma, you had some other things going on that colored our response. But, to your point, I think it's two things. Yes, I think awareness is critical and important. But the other piece of it is, and I kind of go back to today's opioid crisis. There's now not a person walking this earth that doesn't know someone who struggled with opioids or died of an overdose.
Oh yeah.
And I think that humanizes it. Like when it impacts you personally, like, wait a minute, I know that guy. He wasn't a screw up. He was a good guy that went down the rabbit hole, and we tried our best to get him back and we couldn't do it. You begin to situate this along a continuum of human frailties that, quite frankly, we all have.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So I have so many questions about the opioid crisis and things like that, but keep us on track with your career. So that's how it starts out. That's your kind of your initial connections, vibes first, with the domestic violence side of things and protecting people, right? Court orders, and then moving into this AIDS world, where you spent 20 years of your career in that space.
Yeah, just short of 20 years. And, out of the blue, I got a call from Adelphi University, and they said, hey, look, there's this organization in Nassau County. They do substance use services. Are you interested in having a conversation about coming and running it? And I said, well, I don't really know. What do they do? Well, one of the things they do is they do planned family interventions. Well, wait a minute. I just mentioned to you that I lost my mother to chronic alcoholism. We tried for years to get her into treatment. I'm like, wait, there's an organization where people will come to your house, they'll work with that person, they'll help you create a united front and a strategy for getting that person into care. That might have made a huge difference. Tell me more about this organization.
Yeah. Wow. So again, it's life pulls us in certain directions, right? And opportunities in front of us, and that obviously drew on your own personal experience. And I haven't said it yet. My condolences on your mom. Listen, you're welcome. I know a lot of people, especially by the drink, that again, I grew up working. I was 16 years old as a bartender, man. By the time I was, busting tables and washing glasses and stuff. By the time I was 18, I was bartending 4 nights a week, man. I've kind of seen that. Talk about a continuum. I've seen that, man. I've seen the tragedy of lives that end inside of a glass or inside of a bottle, man. It's just really, really sad. So you decide that this is the right place to go to, right? Several interviews and stuff like that, right?
Yep. So I go and do that. They said, look, the organization needs some fixing. And so, I spent 9 years there helping to fix the organization, now run by a very competent gentleman, Steve Chasman, who was actually the clinical director while I was there. FCA came calling a couple times, and I finally said yes. And I imagine we'll talk about FCA after the break. But, that brings us to today. And so all in all, lots of years in the space. I stopped counting how many, but lots of years in the health and human services space. As you could tell, I don't necessarily choose easy issues or easy vocations, but it makes me a better person.
I can tell that. And thank God that there are people. Wow, I said thank God. I don't usually go that way. But thanks that there are people like you in the world that are making these choices, that are being on the front lines. Yolanda Rubano Gross at Options, Neela over at EAC Network, right? Shout out to Steve Chasman. He's been on the show. And actually, I think was it Chris Kelly it was somebody that I had a connection. I think it was Chris Kelly, who's over at EAC, who does development.
Chris, yeah.
Yeah, and he was like helping me get to Steve because I did something around substance abuse and addiction. And the word that's escaping me right now, how we protect people, it'll come to me, but maybe if I just drop it here, you'll say, we're protecting people who are users, not that we're necessarily legitimizing it, but treating this as a way to protect folks. You know what I'm trying to say? As far as like, in an environment where these folks are not at so much risk.
Yeah, it's got to be safe, supportive, and harm reduction is the way to go. If you're not ready to stop using today, what can I do to keep you alive till tomorrow?
Harm reduction. Thank you. I couldn't grasp it. I was going all over the harm reduction. Gang, that might not be, if somebody's doesn't understand addiction and doesn't understand substance abuse and maybe has challenges understanding the mental health issues, might think, no, that's not right. That's not how we do things. Well, I can't help somebody if they're gone tomorrow, right? We have to keep them here with us so we can do the work, right? It's building and stacking these two things at the same time. All right, the organization's Family and Children's Association. I'm blessed to have Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds here with me today. We're going to have a lot of conversations. We are going to go to a quick break. We'll be back in about 60 seconds. And you good? You good, Dr. Reynolds?
Good.
All right, let's go. Break time.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. So cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.
Join me in the attic every Friday. I mean, you can join me in the attic other days. We'll just be doing other things. But join me in the attic every Friday morning for this particular program. Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds is here, Family and Children's Association. So, Dr. Reynolds, we're going to go into FCA. Obviously, that's part of why you're here. But I want to actually ask you, would you be open to playing around with, I ask you right here live on the show, kind of putting you on the spot, but I want to read this. So, Dr. Reynolds' doctoral dissertation was on using the trans-theoretical model of behavior change to explore substance use patterns and HIV risk behavior as a suburban sample. I don't want you to read your thesis here.
No, you don't.
Here. I don't think I could make it through with my ADHD, but here's what I do want to understand. The work you do must be informed by the research you did. So when I was doing my extra research this morning, I was saying, this is where this man lives. This is what he's involved with. I mean, how much because, it's funny, I'm raising 4 kids with my wife. And I don't know that everybody needs to, not just my 4 children, but generally everybody needs to go into higher education, right? Like to go to that level. I think there's a lot of different, that's another conversation for another show. But certainly your background and the work you've done and the research you've done informs the work you do every day. Can you speak to a little bit about that, like patterns of behavior and
Yeah.
substance
Yeah.
like that, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so it's set the stage. And in fact, before the break, the last thing we talked about was harm reduction. And the basis for harm reduction is that trans-theoretical model, which is a fancy way of saying there are predictable patterns to the way people change, right? And so for me, I followed a cohort of 400 injection drug users and sex workers over the course of 2 years and talked to them about their willingness and desire to make changes in their lives, no matter how incremental. Right. And so we took a look and said, so, if you have an intent to use less, if you have an intent to not share syringes, back then we used to talk with people about cleaning their syringes. That's how you gain self-efficacy. That's how you gain self-agency. And then those are building blocks. If you think about any behavior you've stopped or started, there's a process we go through. And so I mentioned to you before we came on that I'm a triathlete. I did Ironman Florida. There's a bunch of things that I did before I actually went and committed to doing that, right? I went and did some research. I kind of thought about what swimming and biking and running for that amount of time would feel like. I wrote it on my calendar and said Ironman 140.6. I then started to tell people and say, look, I'm going to do this really cool thing to get that external support and to hem myself in. And so there's a process that we go through when we decide to adopt a behavior. If you've ever stopped something, you begin thinking about the alternatives, right? People who stop smoking begin looking at, NRT ads and how to do nicotine replacement. They began cutting down. They began thinking about the impact that smoking has on their health. When we change, we do it in pretty predictable kind of ways. That set the basis for the way we operate things at FCA, because our approach is we're going to get you where you're at, right? If I had never swam, bike, or run before, and somebody said, why don't you swim 2 miles, bike 140 miles, and then run a full marathon, I would say, have you lost your damn mind? People still ask me that, right? But the fact that there was a buildup to that I was ready. The same way if we say to somebody who's actively using drugs, do you want to quit? And typically our approach is, do you want to quit? You should quit. Do you want to quit? Do you want to quit? And that person tunes us out rather than, so dude, what would life look like if you cut back a little bit? Suppose you didn't smoke weed first thing in the morning, right? What would life look like?
How would your day what would the trajectory of your day?
Yeah. And so it's meeting people where they're at, never leaving them there, right? But meeting people where they're at. And if you're not ready to make those changes today, and those changes apply to everything, it applies to drugs and alcohol, it applies to mental health. How can we help you make small incremental steps that work for you and only you to get you down that road? So that research really formed the basis for a lot of what we do at FCA today, and quite frankly, a lot of how I live my life.
Yeah, well, I believe it. I'm looking around. I just looked behind me because I keep a lot of books around me, and there's a book called it's here in the attic somewhere, but it's called The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. Darren Hardy used to I understand he's not the editor anymore of Success Magazine, but that was one of his businesses. He got a really cool book, and it's just these little small incremental changes that we make. He tells one quick anecdote about these 3 friends who project the years in time. One guy decides he's going to cut down on the sugars and cut down on the cake and cookies, right? And then another guy is going to cut down on all that stuff and start to go to the gym every morning. Nothing crazy, but 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes at the gym, right? And the other guy does nothing, doesn't change, still has, his 12 beers throughout the week, whatever the case may be, eating the fried food. And just in that 1 year, even if they started at the same place, they're in completely different places because that, it compounds over time. But it's those small, simple changes and decisions that we make. That's the big thing, right? The decision to decide that we're going to make a different behavior.
And look, I think consistency compounds.
Yeah.
And so, early on in my running career, I made a decision where I was going to run at least a mile every day. And I did it for 777 days until a medical procedure took me out. And I will tell you, no matter what. So one night we're at my son's gymnastics meet in Westchester. It's like 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, I haven't run yet today. Literally leave the gymnastics meet, stop by a park and run in my jeans and boots for a mile in order to get it done. I ran through airports. I did whatever it took. But it was the consistency.
It's the consistency and commitment. You weren't going to let the day end without you doing that.
Right.
Get it in,
Right.
man. Got to get it in. Love
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. Now I get this great visual of you up in Westchester at 11:15 at night.
Gotta get the mile in. Gotta get the mile in.
World, people listening, wherever you are, wherever you found this podcast or show, wherever you are, you watching us, you listen to us. Think about that. He was disciplined. He said that it's going to strike midnight one way or the other, and either I'm going to be sad that I didn't make it happen, pissed off at myself maybe, or I'm going to go, nice job, Reynolds. You got another one in there. That's another day you did it. Yeah, I'll tell you this, gang. I'm not in the program, not an AA or anything like that. This is not going to be a show about me, but I want to just say, I understand when I had quit drinking many years ago, I just had to go to bed before I had a drink. Like that was it. Actually, this is coming up for me now, realizing it because I was listening to Wayne Dyer and he mentioned something about that. And it was similar to my walk in life. And I think it's that I knew that was the way. Now it's many, many years ago. I do it for different reasons. I do it differently. But the point of the matter is it was commitment and the consistency. And that's what I'm hearing. And that's every part of life. Like you said, that's from substance abuse to athletics to career. What do you want to do? What's your next step in life? What are you trying to accomplish, right?
Look, and for FCA, that consistency, now goes back 140 years. Right? We're one of the oldest organizations on Long Island, founded in the late 1800s. Since then, the organization has endured, a couple world wars, the Great Depression, Sandy, 9/11, COVID, you name it. And in fact, during COVID, I think we were the only organization that I used to say to our staff, this is not our first pandemic. The folks who founded FCA in 1918 and 1919 lived through the Spanish flu pandemic, and it became our rallying cry. This is not our first pandemic. We got this.
What a bit of swagger during the pandemic to say this is not our first pandemic. Were there t-shirts? You should get those.
They were not, because they weren't in the budget. But, look, I think, organizations like ours really rose to the occasion during COVID. Like COVID really challenged us in ways that, I think we're still experiencing, especially as it relates to mental health. But I was really proud of the fact. I'm proud of longevity for the organization. I'll tell you, there's a couple things the longevity does for me, right? One of the things it does for me is that when I feel like there is zero way I can take a day off, I look back and say, dude, the organization made it for 140 years without you. They were all okay. And there's going to be another 140 years. And so it does it does humble you, and it situates your servant work in a much larger context where tens of thousands of people have worked at FCA, cared for people who needed a little bit of help. And we're part of that journey of a very, very long, storied history.
So is that for you? Is that like you're saying that's a bit of an ego check for you, and I'm not so high on the horse about Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds, but really just think about, it's about these people. It's about the team. I find that most of the leaders I talk to are you know what, Tommy, it's not about me. It's not about me, man. Right. In your case, it's about these 360 employees or these 200 volunteers, right? Running these 40 programs, which we'll get into today. It's that, right? It's the people. I love that. That's also important, I think. And I noticed something because I'm in the benefits world. I noticed something about you, that you're certified in EAP, Employee Assistance Programs. I want to talk about that as how it kind of relates to what you do from a leadership perspective, if we can get into it. And also, to me, it's like it's that ability that you say you can step away. We need to have that self time. We need to, because I mean, I'm one of these people that's like, oh, even when I'm on vacation, man, I'm on. No worries, man. I'll get on meetings. I'll get on phone calls. Yeah. Not good, man. It's really not good. It's not the way to do things. It's not self-care is not selfish. We got to remember that. And we all need to take our time when appropriate, right? That's what I think I'm hearing from you too.
Yeah. And I'm really cognizant in that, my leadership team is going to kind of handle things the way I do. And if they see me never sign off, they're never going to be comfortable signing off. Right. And, look, I have an obligation to them.
Yeah, that's so interesting because, if you're in the office and you look and his light or her light is still on, you're like, oh man, I can't leave.
Right.
Because that's what we were taught. Like, not just, I grew up in the corporate world, right? But, then you have nonprofit, same kind of thing. Oh, well, the light's still on, I can't go. But if I see Dr. Reynolds going to his kids' gymnastics event, or not missing that family thing, or not missing that, then I realize that's the culture we're building. And I want to talk some about that because, yeah, we're going to talk about programs, we're going to talk about how you impact community. But I think one of the most important parts of your community is the people who show up every day and get a paycheck on the 15th and 30th, because without them, the organization doesn't run. So I want to talk a little bit, if we could, about how that your internal community is, and how, even I talked about the EAP and stuff like that, because that to me is critically important. We talk a lot in my business about employer of choice, right? How do we care for people? So I think a lot of that is from leadership down, showing that balance of, yes, I'm an individual, I have a family, and I'm here to work at this company. But, none of us are irreplaceable at the end of the day.
That's right. And the last thing I want from my staff is for them to neglect their own families as we're caring for other people's families. Right. If we're all about strengthening families and communities, charity begins at home.
100%. Right? Do the work, you do the work, right? We're doing this work. We should be looking out for our own people. 100%. Yeah, I totally get it. All right, we do go to breaks. It's part of the show. I'd rather not, but it's part of the show. So here we go. We're going to go to a quick one. Logan, not too long. This is a short break. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. It's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy and Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business, or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. So cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.
Funny story for you, Dr. Reynolds. So I'm just sharing, gang, if you're not listening, excuse me. Well, if you're not listening, I don't know how you're hearing me. But if you're not watching, go to FCALI.org, FCALI.org. If you are watching and listening, the funny story is I'm scrolling through this during the break because I wanted to share it. And I looked down at my wrist and I'm looking at this bracelet that you have on the website that I purchased at an event we hosted for the Philanthropy Network of New York, the Unconference, and it says Unstoppable. And I'm wearing the bracelet on my wrist.
Nice.
I bought it from your team over there, but I didn't put all the pieces together because another organization was selling candles right there, and I'd forgotten who I bought it from. I think maybe Paige and the team were over there that day.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
Shout out Paige. Yes, I remember. So I got my Unstoppable bracelet. I didn't know the story about Anthony Robles here, that three-time All-American wrestler who wrestles. He only has one leg. I didn't know any of this story. So shout out to Anthony. Would love to connect with you and meet with you at some point. But I've been wearing this bracelet with another bracelet that says Never Stop Learning that I picked up from our Unconference. And I appreciate you being at the Unconference, your team being connected to the Unconference, you being with us the other night, really is what I meant to say, at a social event that we had, really talking about the work we're doing with Philanthropy Network in New York. Liz and Kim, my partners in that venture, were here a couple of weeks ago. We're not going to talk much about it. But gang, what we do is volunteerism and corporate social responsibility to connect businesses and nonprofit organizations to do that great work together. But I want to get into how about the bracelet? You got to get one. You want me to buy you one of these? Unstoppable?
Absolutely. Or like five.
$5 each. Now I see why you want me to buy five. But it's this kind of stuff that really sticks with us. It's the connections. It's the awareness. So I want to go back. Let's talk about the organization. We talk 40 plus programs. I said 360 employees, $24 million annual budget.
Yeah.
Big organization doing real work. I mean, how many thousands of people get support from this organization every year?
So we're up to between 35 and 40,000. I checked the other day, and our youngest client is about 18 months right now, and our oldest client is 103. And so, we've got programs that run the lifespan, and there's a couple things, that go into the thinking for that. And it's not just expansion for the sake of expansion. It's, can we make it easier for folks to access the variety of services that they need in their lives? And I think EAC uses the same model. We want to make sure that if you have one problem, we don't have to send you up the block to 3 other agencies to get the care for the other challenges that happen in your life. The other thing that I'm really proud of is that we don't chase grants. We sit back and say, what are the most pressing and vexing issues facing Long Island? And is that our space? And can we make a difference? And I'll give you just 3 quick examples. One is the opioid crisis has hit our region incredibly hard. We've run 2 treatment centers, state licensed treatment centers, since the beginning of time. But some of the programs we've added have filled the gaps in services that resulted in people losing their lives to overdoses. And so we opened 3 recovery centers where folks who had found a path to recovery could come and socialize or attend a meeting or work on their resume or just hang out with other sober people. We started a program called Sherpa that works and walks alongside folks as they go on their journey as a strategy to kind of keep them healthy, keep them alive, help them make changes in our lives and that kind of thing. And so our response to the opioid crisis has been really robust. One of the common denominators that I'll say is we have a gun violence prevention program as well. And that came out of some emergent, issues confronting Nassau County. In both of those programs, the heart and soul of those programs are people with lived experience. And so the folks who work in our recovery programs are folks with lived experience. The folks that work in our violence prevention programs are all folks that have been victims or perpetrators of violence in the past, and are hell-bent on making their communities better. And then the third place where we've really expanded is in our senior services. The single largest growing population in Nassau and Suffolk County are people over the age of 80. Why? Young people are leaving in droves, which means that our population is aging. And we wanted to make sure that, like everybody wants for their parents and grandparents, that you're able to stay in your home. And here on Long Island, with a cost of living that's through the roof, it's very challenging to do that and very challenging to get to the right care. So those 3 dynamics, the opioid crisis, gun violence in some communities, and then the issues facing older Long Islanders were 3 things that we identified a couple of years ago and said, look, what do the dynamics look like? Where could we make a difference? Where is it kind of our space? There are other issues, honestly, that we identify where I'm like, you know what? Let EAC do that. Let's partner with Likehead. Let's find somebody else to do that. It's not our sweet spot.
So, all right. So this is like critically important here from a grant perspective, because that's what I'm hearing. It's like not mission drift. It's not like let's stay in our lane once we evaluate the opportunities in front of us and the need. Opportunity is another word for need. What is the need so you talk opioid crisis, which, gosh, man, we could talk days about that because we lost somebody very close to us, 10 years ago during when it was, it's unbelievable that this is still a crisis and epidemic all these years later. I mean, I remember actually 14 years ago, somebody very close to me in our family passed. And at that time, everyone you said that story to said, yeah, I know, my cousin, or, a guy I went to high school with, or, that sort of thing. Like that was it. And there's this movie on, I don't know if you've seen it yet. And it's called, is it called Painkiller? I think it's called Painkiller. It's on Netflix with Matthew Broderick. I watched him and I hated Matthew Broderick at the end of it because he plays the head of Purdue Pharma. And mean, like these people knew, and they just kind of doubled down and made this worse. And so I'm getting off track, but opioid crisis, the guns, and then the seniors. The thing I want to ask you about specifically as it relates to the seniors, although I want to play with these other two topics as well if we have time. You said that young people are leaving Long Island because they can't make it here. What is somebody on a fixed income? How are they going to make it here? I want to ask you that, and then I want to go back to your piece about, you're not chasing grants, because I think that's very informative to other leaders and nonprofits. I mean, I have friends who run nonprofits that have a $50,000 annual budget, right? And then we have organizations like yours, and then even organizations that are larger. So it really runs a gamut. But so let's start with the senior crisis and how are you supporting these people, because they don't want to leave. And then they actually, like you said, the people are living longer, so they need access to care. So they need to be mobile and as best as possible. So let's talk a little bit about that.
So I think a lot of it is, there's two main approaches. One is that getting seniors the help they need before they're in crisis is really, really important. And so we run a very robust financial counseling program very often. And I see this in folks who I've encountered in my own life. By the time they reach out for help, financially, there's a lot of wreckage. It's like, okay, I don't know if we can fix this.
Because what do? You can't go back and work the last 40 years or
right.
You didn't do it. You didn't do it. So now it's right.
But if we do some planning in the right way in terms of Medicaid eligibility and things like that, there are seniors who come to us and they're like, well, I could stay in my home, but I'm having a hard time caring for the house. Financially, I'm okay, but I can't do all of these chores anymore, and I can't find anyone. I don't trust anyone to come into my house. Well, we have a chore worker program. We actually put people in your house, right? And so some of that is just looking for small ways to help people. And we do that with kids too, but very often people don't need a whole lot of help. It's a little lift up every once in a while that makes a huge difference. And so with the senior population, it's, having conversations with the family, it's rallying the troops, it's making sure that you have good access to medical care. If you're heading down a road where you have some memory issues or some dementia, it's intervening early enough so that we can kind of address that and get it dealt with. We use the same approach when we deal with folks in Hempstead who are struggling with poverty or literacy, that recently arrived immigrants. We find that, that early hug, that early wraparound services, that early, we're here to help you. If we can't help you, I'll get you to somebody who can, no matter what. We're in this together. Makes a huge difference. And sometimes just psychologically for seniors, knowing that there's a whole team of, 360 people behind them, no matter what, that in and of itself makes a huge difference.
It's a big deal. It really is. And God, I have so many questions for you. I'd love to have you back and do this again, because we're never going to cover a lot of things, because you bring so much interesting background and knowledge to these different scenarios. I want to go and talk. Let's go back to that grant piece in a minute, because I'd like to, if we were speaking to your peers in this world who sometimes go, ooh, we can get in on this X dollar grant over here if we, whatever kind of, I don't want to, I'll just say it, shoehorn a program to make it work so it fits with us. Although what do you think about that? And what, obviously, I know what you think about it from what you just said, how you all do it, but can you speak about best practices as they approach grant makers and opportunities like that?
I think grant makers have become much more sophisticated, that they look for collaboration. So when we opened Thrive in Suffolk County, it wasn't just an FCA program. We engaged 3 partners. We engaged the community to come up with the name and the branding and that kind of thing. And so I think the more you open it up and say, look, we need partners in this, or this is not our space. You mentioned Neela. Neela and I trade off grant opportunities all the time where we say, this isn't for us, but maybe it's for you. Where we do joint projects together. That's what served the community. Really, what you would hope for is not individual organizations on street corners doing their own thing. What you want is a patchwork, a safety net, so that nobody's going to fall through, and we're all going to stitch ourselves together and make sure that we aren't losing people in the process.
I love that. Patchwork, safety net. And then he said, we're all going to stitch together. He kept it going, man. That's good. You're a heck of a storyteller, man. We could definitely hang out more often.
Absolutely.
I want to ask you before we go to a break. We did call this, child's mental health, and we haven't really touched on much of that at all. And we're going to run out of time. So when we come back from the break, I want you to just hit upon that if you could, about I'm raising 4 kids. They're 14, 13, 11, and 9. These friggin' devices and everything else that's coming at them, and the fentanyl and the this and the that. I don't know, man. I grew up in the 80s and in the 90s, and that was a challenging time. I feel like this is more difficult for kids. So if we could at least touch upon it, and then maybe you and I do something else, a Facebook Live, to focus on that even more. So if that's cool with you, let's come back a little bit about that. Maybe we can hit the opioid crisis. And I really got to know from you and from what the development team said. Make sure you tell them about this event. Make sure you tell them about that event, that sort of stuff. We got to hit that before we go. And then also any ways we can help. So the show is Philanthropy and Focus. The leader of this organization, Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds, Family and Children's Association is the name of your organization. And it's break time. We'll be back in a couple minutes.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy and Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. So cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.
Ever. I feel like we got a lot to do and a little time to do it. And my daughter is in the Alice in Wonderland play later on. So I feel like that White Rabbit, like I'm trying to do a lot of things. I got 19 questions. We got 7 or 8 minutes to do it all in. So let's do this. Let's talk about the organization's scope of work on the child's mental health case. And because I was going to also ask how that affects your employees and their children. So I think it's all informative about that. And then if we have some time to go into other topics, I'll take us there.
Yeah, so brand new news out within the past day or so in terms of children's mental health. Federal government does an annual survey, and they came out and said, hey, great news. Kids' mental health didn't get any worse in the past year. Well, that's terrible because last year, 25% of the kids surveyed contemplated suicide. And so how is this a victory when we leave behind 25% of our kids who are actively thinking about taking their own lives? And so we've got a long way to go when it comes to kids' mental health. In any given month, we serve between 300 and 400 kids with mental health issues, supporting their families and getting them to the right services and providing them with the counseling. I will say it's challenging. Here in Nassau and Suffolk, if you try to look up an adolescent psychiatrist today and you call for an appointment, assuming you can get through, they're going to give you an appointment if you call today, sometime in late October. Lots of bad things happen to kids over the span of 2 or 3 months. And so we've got a huge mental health crisis on our hands. Very happy a couple of years ago when Governor Hochul announced a $1 billion investment in children's mental health. But geez, that money needs to get out to communities a lot faster. Our kids are struggling. Our kids are not doing okay. Our kids are struggling. You asked a little bit about social media, and I think that plays a big role in this. And New York State is taking some landmark steps when it comes to social media. When parents say to me, look, my kid's on social media, is it really the end of the world? The question I ask them, and I think it's $1 million question, is if TikTok or Instagram were a place, would you let your child go there by themselves?
Wow, what a paradigm shift, man. Wow.
Right?
Totally.
Think about it for a second. Think about everything we see on TikTok.
I'm thinking about totally unregulated access to all sorts of things that I have no idea what they're seeing.
Right.
Right. With adult human beings there doing whatever.
Right. Imagine a scary circus with scary clowns and everything. That's basically what TikTok is.
I wouldn't let, of course not. Right.
Right.
That's the answer. Right.
And so you know, the reality is the feds are not going to regulate this. Nobody's going to regulate it. But that starts at home. I always say to parents, stop waiting for Congress, stop waiting for the governor. You know, some of this is abandoning that do as I say, not as I do mindset. And parents will say, you shouldn't always be on social media. Meanwhile, I see families out to dinner where both parents are on their phones for the entire 45 minutes, an hour. And so part of this is modeling the behavior we want to see in our kids. Part of this is normalizing mental health issues and giving our kids the tools and the terms to express how they're feeling. We know that kids who struggle with anxiety and depression and insomnia, without the proper care, what are they going to do? They're going to turn to cannabis. They're going to turn to alcohol. They're going to turn to other things that are not healthy.
If they're not going to get the services they need, they're going to find the services they need.
Absolutely. You're going to find a way to make the uncomfortability go away. You're going to find the way to feel like you fit in.
Yeah.
And once
I'm in pain, Dr. Reynolds, and I don't have something to solve the pain, I'm going to go find something to
that's right.
help me with the pain. That's the thing. We're pretty resourceful as a species. You know?
100%. And look, if it's not pain, it's, you know, there are kids who will say for the first time, I feel like I'm at peace. I feel like I fit in. I feel normal, quote unquote. And then we're wrestling that joint or that beer away from that kid along with their normalcy. They're never going to let go.
Right.
And so, you know, this crisis in kids' mental health, COVID didn't cause it. Kids have mental health problems long before COVID. It made it worse, but it's an opportunity for us to begin to integrate the way we approach these things. You know, still in this state, mental health and substance use disorders are dealt with two separate state agencies, very often two separate types of programs. Let's integrate this together. Let's not have the social media conversation separately. Let's talk about how it impacts mental health. Let's talk about how bullying impacts kids' mental health. Let's talk about how mental health impacts kids' ability or desire to use substances, sometimes into their teens and young adulthood.
I want to just say something. Listen, you're the doctor, I'm not, so I'm going to ask you this, but my assumption is, I think one fits into the other category, right? Substance abuse, at least in my world, is a mental health issue.
Yes, 100%.
Right? So one is like, you know, it's one of those things like a logic statement or whatever. Like, you know, one is just part of the other. Obviously, it's not substance abuse. I don't know anybody who goes, I'm just going to go use some substances, you know, without having some catalyst in their life that makes them feel like they're searching for something, right? And then, you know, that first drink or that first smoke or that first whatever, you know, may feel good, did feel good, whatever, but then and the tail end of that, you know, it's much worse, obviously, as we know. So so it's funny how these things were separate and siloed and certainly don't belong that way. They need to be.
For sure. For sure. But, you know, Tommy, one of the things that we've become really clear on is that all the needs we've talked about, we have waiting lists for some of our services. And so government doesn't properly fund a lot of the things we're talking about, or they're late to the party. And so the children's mental health crisis has been burgeoning for 10 years. Same thing with the opioid crisis, even longer. You know, one of the things we rely on is charitable contributions from the community. People like you who buy $35 bracelets. That $35 is what enables us to whittle down that waiting list. It's what enables us to serve kids and to serve seniors. And so, you know, Paige O'Brien would kill me if I didn't mention our fall harvest celebration on November 14th. One of our biggest fundraisers of the year. It's in Bethpage at the Heritage Club. You mentioned Kim Cottage, one of our honorees this year, which I'm really excited about. She's a dynamo. She's done a lot for us, and so we are honoring her. Also on the mental health front, Tommy Shevlin, Nassau County PBA, who's been very open about his own mental health challenges and suicide among cops.
Yeah, just to interrupt you really quick, I'm sharing that. So this is, if you go to the website, gang, you can see November 14th at the Heritage Club at Bethpage. We'll be there. You know, Liz Seda, Kim Cottage, obviously one of your honorees, and me, I will be there representing and supporting. So we'll be in the room that night. Go back to the piece with the gentleman who's a police officer.
Yeah, so one of our honorees, Tommy Shevlin, runs the Nassau County PBA. His entire platform is on mental health issues and law enforcement. Been very public about his own struggles as a cop with mental health issues. Very outspoken on the issue of suicide prevention for both law enforcement and veterans. And so, the plea here is, FCA is an organization that really serves to bring communities together, and that we're all in this. You can't look at this and say, well, I don't work for FCA, so there's no role for me. There's a role for all of us, both in our personal lives, in our professional lives, and becoming a part of these organizations. We were on a call, a bunch of not-for-profit executives this morning talking about some stuff that's happening in Suffolk County. And we all talked about how different the county would look without places like Island Harvest and Long Island Cares and EAC and LICAT and FCA and Family Service League. And what would Suffolk County be like without all of us? And I will say there's another benefit to that, and that is, at FCA, we got 360 people who have stepped up and said, you know what, I'm probably not going to make as much money, but I'm committed to my community. And I want to see a community that's healthier, that's safer. I want to make sure that my kids and grandkids can live here and enjoy all of the benefits that other communities maybe enjoyed in the past. And I think, most of these not-for-profits are about bringing communities together, bringing people together, and making a difference.
So I want to challenge the whole sector. I want to challenge anybody listening. Here's the thing about that. That's what, by the way, that's what this show is about, to say, I don't understand how government, I always say, no one does this work if it's not for, you just mentioned the names, the list of the organizations here in Long Island that are doing this work, and there's thousands of them. That's always been the premise of the show, is that who would do this? No one would. That's the point, right? So what drives me absolutely bonkers is that your staff has to, quote unquote, take a haircut to work with your organization or another organization. Why? And I know why, because it's money, but why don't we as a society and the government and all these things, and I'm putting you out there with this question, it's not really, it's more of a, we'll get to it some other day kind of question maybe, but how do we fix the fact that why should these people not be making as much money as in other parts of the marketplace when they're doing the work that's helping community? I don't get it, Dr. Reynolds.
Well, and look, we are charged with solving our community's most vexing problems, right? Homelessness, untreated addiction, mental health issues, keeping our seniors. These are important things. And we know that on Long Island, when those healthcare disparities flourish, we all suffer.
Yes. Well, so again, this is the last thing I'll leave with, because it drives me nuts. So a company that's going to the market, a for-profit company, a startup that's looking to raise funds, would never say, hey, look how little we pay our people. Hey, look how little we spend on our programming and R&D and iterating. No, they would never say that. They would say, here's what we're doing. We're investing. That needs to be flipped. I don't know how. I'm sure you've been complaining about it longer than I've even known what nonprofits were. But right, I mean, it's something we need to talk about.
Yeah. Tommy, look, it's things like this that bring everybody together. So I really appreciate it, not only on behalf of FCA, but on behalf of the entire sector. I'm the guy that gets to do radio shows and podcasts while the folks on our staff are out there doing the hard work. And as we speak, they're talking to folks in crisis. They're providing shelter to homeless kids. They're working with seniors. And, I'm privileged to lead the team. But I'm just amazed at the work they do day in and day out, very quietly, with a lot of humility, with a lot of grace, and with a lot of gratitude.
Well, the 359 other people, other than this man, I'm sending out love and shout outs and hugs and thank you for everything you're doing. And I'm sending those to you too, sir, but they're not here to hear it as much, So thank you for what you do. Thank you for everybody who serves in the nonprofit sector. Thank you, Dr. Reynolds, for being, just an incredible guest, an incredible conversation. Obviously, this show is never long enough. We always run out of time. We never run out of words. Make it a great day, everybody. We'll see you next Friday morning. I'll be right here in the attic.
Thanks, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. So cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.